Hi developers! When using TypeScript, there are many common mistakes that developers can make. Avoiding these mistakes will help to keep your code clean, efficient, and save you a lot of trouble. In today's video, we'll talk about the most common TypeScript mistakes and how you can avoid them. So let's take a look at the first one. Here we have an enum of roles. It has admin, member, and a manager. Now let's define a user. It'll have a role and it'll be an admin. Now let's try to log the user role. As you can see, we are getting 0, and this is because of the default behavior of TypeScript. In TypeScript enums, values are numeric indices by default starting from 0. For example, roles.admin would be 0, roles.member would be 1, and roles.manager would be 2. This can cause confusion and bugs, especially when debugging or logging values. Consider a scenario where you are logging user roles for debugging purposes. If you log roles.admin, you will get 0 instead of admin. This will make the logs hard to read and understand. Additionally, if the order of the enum members changes, the numeric values will change as well. This will lead to potential mismatches in your application. To avoid this mistake, we just have to assign string values to each property like that. This way, if we log the admin property, we'll get admin, which is the value we assigned to instead of getting 0. Now let's talk about the second mistake. In this example, we want to get a data of a city from an API. This is the type of the data that we will get. It has a title and coordinates. Since we know that this API will give this type of data, we can put this type right here. And this is a mistake because we are not sure that the data from the API have the city data type. So we have to ensure that. And in order to ensure that the data we get from the API has all the required properties of the city data type, we have to build a typeguard. The typeguard is a function that ensures that the data is a city data, so we can make sure that the data is the same type as the city data type. So let's build our typeguard. Let's call it isCityData. Here we have to put our data as a parameter, and the function will return true if the data that we put is a city data. Otherwise, it'll return false. So here we can say data is city data. Inside the function, we have to write all the logic of the city data type. So the type of the data should be an object, and it should not be null, and it should include a title and a coordinates. If the data that we put passes all this logic, then we know for sure it is a city data. So this is our typeguard for the city data. And here we have to fetch the data from the API. We have to use the city data typeguard to make sure that the data is a city data. If it is not a city data, we have to throw an error. Otherwise, if it is a city data, then TypeScript will know that this is a city data by default because we use the is keyword in our typeguard. And we don't have to assign this type here, and of course we'll get auto completion. Now let's talk about the mistake of using any instead of unknown. When developers don't know the type of something, it is common that they use any to disable type checking. For example, here we have a try and catch statement. The error is with the any type, and here we are logging the error message if it exists. However, if we use any a lot in our project, we'll lose the power of TypeScript. A better approach here is to use the unknown because we don't know the type of the error. And inside the catch statement, we want to use type narrowing in order to expect the type of the error. First, we'll check if the type of the error is an object. Then we're going to make sure that it is not null. Then we have to check if the message property exists in error. Then we also have to ensure that the message is a string. This way, we won't lose the power of TypeScript, and we will avoid getting errors such as cannot read properties of undefined. Now we're going to talk about utility types in TypeScript. A lot of developers don't use utility types in their code, but they can be very helpful in certain cases. Here we have a person interface type with a couple of properties. We have the first name, last name, age, and hobby. Now we want to create another type for a football player. We want all the properties of the person except the hobby property. To do that, we have to use the omit utility type. The omit utility type accepts the type that we want to omit from. In our example, we want to use the person type. Then it will accept the property that we want to omit. In our case, we want to omit the hobby property. And here the football player will take all the properties from the person type except the hobby property. Let's define a player variable. It should have all the properties of the person except the hobby. If we want to add another property to the football player type, all we have to do is to use the AND operator. Let's add a team, for example, and here we should also include the team property. Now I want to talk about a very common mistake. When defining an object type in TypeScript, there are two ways that you can define your object type. You can either use interface like that or a type like that. While both have their specific use cases, worrying too much about which one to use can slow down your development process. In terms of compilation, both interfaces and types have the same performance. The key differences between type and interface come into play in more advanced scenarios. So you should just pick either type or interface and use it for all your projects just for consistency, and stop worrying so much about which one you should use. Now let's talk about optional properties. In TypeScript, when you define an object, it is common between developers to use optional properties. This way you won't get errors if you don't define the property. But the problem is that you will lose the power of TypeScript because the object will be very similar to any, and you will have to always check before using the optional properties. So you should minimize the optional properties in your TypeScript code. So that's for today's video. If you are still watching, I'm sure that you have learned something. Don't forget to leave a comment to tell us about what's in your mind, and see you in the next video.